the stalwarts coming out in this cold weather. Today's topic is Deconstructing the I. It's the second in a 5-part series on Jnana Yoga. And just as we did last week, we're going to open with a guided meditation, the first part being what is called a pratyahara, which is calming the mind, reorienting itself. And the second part is going to be a self-investigative experience. So let us begin with Swami Vivekananda's meditation, which he gave in his Raja Yoga classes. So try to sit still and straight, your spine straight, feet flat on the ground, or if you're in the half lotus or full lotus, that is fine. And begin to breathe evenly. Let's take 3 deep breaths, breathing in and exhaling completely. Picture the mind as a calm lake stretched before you. Let the mind drift. See how thoughts come and go as bubbles rising and breaking on the surface, becoming ripples that are ever widening circles. Make no effort to control your thoughts, but watch them. Follow them in imagination as they rise, break, and float away. I am not the mind. I see that I am thinking. I am watching my mind act. Hold fast to the idea. I am the witness, watching my mind drift. The mind is not I. Watch the mind as a thing entirely apart from yourself. Identify yourself with God, never with the mind or matter. Be the witness. Now, during our in-breath, draw your awareness in upon itself, illuminating its own nature. Breathe out, releasing your awareness, letting go of all thoughts and objects of the mind. Breathe in, drawing your awareness in upon itself, illuminating its own nature. Breathe out, releasing your awareness, letting go of all thoughts and objects of the mind. Breathe in, drawing your awareness in upon itself, illuminating its own nature. Breathe out, releasing your awareness, letting go of all thoughts and objects of the mind. As you breathe in, there is no point at which you can detect the real subject. And when you release your awareness during the exhalation, you let go of all contents of the mind, so there is no object to latch onto. Breathe in, drawing your awareness in upon itself, illuminating its own nature. Breathe out, releasing your awareness, letting go of all thoughts and objects of the mind. Breathe in, drawing your awareness in upon the felt direction of the unseen seer, watching the contents of the mind. Breathe out, releasing your awareness, letting go of all thoughts and objects of the mind. Breathe in, drawing your awareness in upon the felt direction of the unseen seer, watching the contents of the mind. Breathe out, releasing your awareness, letting go of all thoughts and objects of the mind. Throughout the whole course of each in-breath and out-breath, gently try to sustain the awareness of awareness. The awareness of awareness. Breathe in, drawing your awareness in upon the felt direction of the unseen seer, watching the contents of the mind. Breathe out, releasing your awareness, letting go of all thoughts and objects of the mind. Gently try to sustain the awareness of awareness. The awareness of awareness. The awareness of awareness. As your mind calms, your breathing will become more and more subtle. And when this happens, disengage your awareness from the breath and rest on the ongoing flow of awareness of awareness. Gently try to sustain the awareness of awareness. On occasion, ask yourself, what is the consciousness that is concentrating? Steadily focus your attention and then raise this question again. What is the consciousness that is concentrating? Gently try to sustain the awareness of awareness. Whenever you are distracted by a noise or some other sensations from your environment, let that serve as a reminder to bring your wandering mind back to the present moment. Now, as we rise from our meditation, continue to recognize all appearances for what they are. Appearances. Don't objectify anything outside, and don't subjectify anything inside. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, Peace be unto us all. So this simple experiential practice will help to lead us into the subject today, deconstructing the I. And in doing so, we're pointing toward the Atman. Swami Vivekananda tells us, according to the Advaita philosophy, there is only one thing real in the universe, which it calls Brahman. Everything else is unreal, manifested and manufactured out of Brahman by the power of Maya. To reach back to that Brahman is our goal. In other words, each one of us is that Brahman plus Maya. Our job is to remove the Maya part. Which is our ignorance, and become who we really are, the Atman, one with Brahman. So let's begin by asking, what is Maya? This cosmic illusion, which is a superimposition upon Brahman, whereby we see a manifold world rather than the one reality, Satchidananda, pure existence, knowledge, and bliss, whereby we see ourselves as only an apparent self. A psychophysical being, not the real self, which is inherently divine. As aspirants, we falsely see ourselves as a human being trying to have a spiritual experience, rather than as a spiritual being having a human experience. Swami Vivekananda's paper on Hinduism, delivered at the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions, states his message. Children of immortal bliss, what a sweet, what a hopeful name. Allow me to call you brethren by that sweet name, heirs of immortal bliss. Yea, the Hindu refuses to call you sinners. Ye are the children of God, the sharers of immortal bliss, holy and perfect beings. Ye divinities on earth, he goes on, sinners, it is a sin to call a man so. It is a standing libel on human nature. Come up, O lions, and shake off the delusion that you are sheep. You are the souls immortal, spirits free, blessed, and eternal. Ye are not matter. Ye are not bodies. Matter is your servant, not you the servant of matter. So when we awake to our true nature, the Atman, we become one with Brahman. Now it doesn't happen overnight. It's a long haul, but we begin with baby steps. Each day we take those baby steps when we try to meditate. And as our sense of self begins to change, becomes transformed, and so does the way we see the world. Once there were 4 sages who realized themselves as the Atman, one with Brahman. They visited Lord Shiva, god of knowledge, and talked with him about immortality of the soul. Yama, king of death, who was standing nearby, was insulted that they didn't greet him, and so he cursed them. Proud sages who ignore the king of death, I curse you that you will have to take animal bodies. And the 4 sages were immediately transformed into 4 dogs. See what I can do to you, he said. But the sages were illumined. Yama, you have no power over us, they said. We are still Brahman. Yama became outraged. He then transformed them into insects. But as the sages watched their bodies being transformed, they laughed at him. Suddenly Shiva appeared and consoled Yama. Yama, you can rule over those who know the body to be their self. You cannot with those who know themselves to be the Atman, to be Brahman, or beyond your power. You may change the body, but you cannot change the real self. So we begin with a question: who am I? Vedanta tells us we're comprised of the body, the mind, and the Atman. The body is the external cloak, and the mind is the internal cloak. The Atman is the real perceiver, the real enjoyer, the being in the body who is working the body by means of the internal organ or the mind. So how do our senses function through the body and the mind? First, externally. We have the instrument of perception, in other words, the eye or the ear, the nose. And secondly, internally, the organs of perception in the mind, which are called indriyas. Third, the mind must be joined to itself, to the organ. Then there's a reaction in the form of will. For example, if a mosquito bites us while we're working, we don't feel any reaction because we're engaged in our work, not in the body. But when the mind is joined to the impressions carried by the organ or indriya in the mind, we feel the mosquito bite. But when the mind is joined to impressions carried by the organ, then we feel that bite. The Upanishadic model of our embodied self is called the Jivatman. We have three bodies that cover the Atman. They're like layers of an onion. We have the physical body, the subtle body, and then the causal body. Each of these bodies is comprised of one or more sheaths called koshas. 5 altogether. There is the outward, the physical sheath, the vital, the mental, the intelligent, and the causal. The physical body is called the Annamaya kosha, the sheath of food, because this body depends on food to survive. The subtle body is comprised of the vital, the mental, and the intelligent sheaths. The vital sheath is the pranamaya kosha, the energy expressed as prana, breath. The mental is the manamaya kosha, and that is the deliberative faculty of the mind that receives sense impressions. The higher mind, which was the mind that was observing your mind, is the vijnanamaya kosha, the intellect, the discriminative faculty that classifies impressions. That higher mind is called the buddhi, and that is what points to the Atman. The Atman is not anything that is perceived. It is beyond sense perception, but it is experienced. The causal body, the Anandamaya kosha, is the sheath of bliss. And causal here means the cause of our sense of ignorance, the root of darkness, our ignorance. So how do our three states of consciousness relate to these three bodies? The waking state is identified with all the three bodies. This I, the ego, I am so-and-so. This I is identified with body consciousness, with the body acting and the mind thinking. Dream consciousness is identified with the subtle and the causal bodies, the mind and the ego at work. In dreamless sleep, we're identified only with the causal body, which is the cause of ignorance. Strangely, this causal body is the sheath of bliss. In deep sleep, we're identified only with the sheath closest to the Atman, near to God. It's not the experience of the real self, because the covering of ignorance remains. However, only in deep sleep are we truly refreshed, because at that time we abide in the sheath closest to the Atman. So what happens to these sheaths at death? The physical body is given up. The subtle and causal bodies, our personality and individuality respectively, accompany the soul to its next birth. The subtle body is the mind, which carries the mental impressions and tendencies from past experiences, which we call samskaras, to the next birth. However, the Atman does not migrate. It is unborn and undying. So what are samskaras? How are they formed? We're all forming samskaras every minute. Swami Vivekananda tells us, each work we do, each thought we think, produces an impression called in Sanskrit samskara upon the mind, and the sum total of these impressions becomes the tremendous force which is called character. So how does this work? Each thought or action we perform within us is a tendency to repeat that thought or action. And you can experiment with yourself. And this explains how we can form a samskara of addiction. All movement of the mind, which are called vrittis, originate from involvement and attachment. So what is the motive power behind activities? Simply, I desire to have something. For example, we start by simply appreciating something. It starts by walking down an avenue, and we look into the shop windows, and we're attracted to something. It draws our attention. And so we look at it again. And the second time, we start to admire it. We experience admiration and appreciation, and these emotions get a hold of us. We begin to enjoy it. Then we develop attachment. We see how this samskara, this impression, forms within us a tendency to repeat itself. We start mentally enumerating its utilitarian values. Desire grows to have it for our own use and goes beyond control. Finally, our sense of propriety is lost, and if someone tries to stop us, we become angry. In the Bhagavad Gita, the second chapter, sloka 62, Krishna tells Arjuna, thinking about sense objects will attach you to sense objects. Grow attached, and you become addicted. Thwart your addiction, it turns to anger. And so in anger, we lose all control. And if we pursue this extreme course without inner check, we ruin the possibilities of spiritual life. In the following sloka, 63, Krishna explains, be angry and you confuse your mind. Confuse your mind, you forget the lesson of experience. Forget experience, you lose discrimination. Lose discrimination, you miss life's only purpose. It's like a ball bouncing down a series of steps. So in this way, we are the creators of our own destiny through our choice of thoughts. The law of karma means every thought we think, every act we perform produces both an external and internal effect. Outwardly, it produces a reaction, great or trivial, in the external world. And internally, it leaves a mark on the mind. Vivekananda tells us every mental and physical blow that is given to the soul, by which, as it were, fire is struck from it, and by which its own power and knowledge are discovered, is karma. But for a spiritual seeker, even negative samskaras can turn us Godward. Why? We learn from our mistakes because they cause us to suffer. And after suffering repeatedly for the same mistakes, over time, our suffering eventually impels us to a higher path. We see dramatic examples of this, coupled with grace, in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. Girish Ghosh is one such example. And so also was his friend, Kalipada Ghosh, a debauched soul, a helpless alcoholic. Swami Adbhutananda, direct disciple of Ramakrishna, related, Kalipada refused to give money to his family, spending it for wine instead. But his wife was very pure. Many years earlier, she had come to the master seeking some kind of medicine that would change her husband's tendencies. The master sent her to Holy Mother. The Holy Mother sent her back to the master. He again sent her to Holy Mother, and this exchange went on 3 times. At last, the Holy Mother wrote the master's name on a bell leaf that had been offered to the Lord and gave it to Kalipada's wife, telling her to chant the Lord's name. Kalipada's wife chanted the Lord's name for 12 years. When the master first met Kalipada, he remarked, "This man has come after tormenting his wife for 12 years. Kalipada was startled, but said nothing. Then the master asked him, "What do you want?" Kalipada asked shamelessly, "Can you give me a little wine?" The master smiled. "Yes, I can, but the wine I have is so intoxicating that you will not be able to bear it." Kalipada took him literally and asked, "Is it real British wine? Please give me a little to soak my throat." "No, it is not British wine," said the master, smiling. "It is completely homemade. This wine cannot be given to just anyone, for not everyone can stand it. If a person tastes this wine even once, British wine will seem insipid to him ever after. Are you ready to drink this wine instead of the other?" For a moment, Kalipada was thoughtful. "And then I heard him said," related Adbhutananda, "Please give me that wine which will make me intoxicated my entire life." The master then touched him, and Kalipada started to weep. We tried to calm him, but he went on weeping in spite of our attempts. Kalipada became a changed man. He felt an irresistible desire to visit Sri Ramakrishna regularly. and ultimately gave up his drinking habit. So here we see the example of a habitual alcoholic whose lifelong habit eventually served to show him the pointlessness of his lifestyle and the self-destructive consequence of his daily round of drink and inebriation. Kalipada's own first-hand experience of daily satiety made him an apt recipient of divine grace, which changed the course of his life forever. Normally, the sum totals of some samskaras throughout our lifetime adhere to the mind, a force which gives the departing soul direction as to its next birth. If we ask ourselves, what caused my present life? We'd have to say it is due to past deeds, mental and physical. What causes our rebirth? Our present deeds, our present life. But the Atman never comes or goes. It's unborn and undying. Vivekananda tells us, it is nature moving before the Atman, and the reflection of this motion is on the Atman. And the Atman ignorantly thinks it is moving and not nature. When the Atman thinks that it is in bondage, but when it comes to find it never moves, that it is omnipresent, then freedom comes. The Atman in bondage is called Jiva. So spiritual life is the methods and the means by which we can unwind our karmas, attenuate our samskaras, and transcend this round of birth and death. That is our work as spiritual aspirants. But we might ask, how can we unwind karmas and realize our true nature, which is the Atman, one with Brahman? Vivekananda guided his students in the West, first to analyze. Jnana Yoga is not an intellectual philosophy, but it is grounded in correct intellectual understanding. We as human beings are conscious. Not only are we conscious, but we are self-aware. We recognize ourselves as a cognizer of all distinct objects and events we observe, is it not? Though my cognized objects vary, my home, my office, my friends, the food I eat, the book I read, I, the cognizer, do not. We are also witness to waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. How can we witness dreamless sleep? We might ask. When we are awake, we remember, I slept soundly. Furthermore, the same I remains constant throughout childhood, youth, and old age. I, the knower, am always the knower. Swami Satprakashananda, in his book, The Universe, God, and God Realization, which we carry here, he was a wonderful, wonderful monk. He saw Swami Vivekananda when he was a young man. He was a disciple of Swami Brahmananda and the founder of the Vedanta Society of St. Louis. He states in his book, there is no subject-object awareness in man's self-awareness. The self is self-manifest. While the objects cognized, external and internal, undergo changes, the cognizer remains constant. So the inmost self of man is changeless, and therefore beyond birth, growth, decay, and death, beyond hunger and thirst, beyond weal and woe. And it is ever shining, being of the nature of consciousness. However, Though we recognize ourselves as distinct from all objects and events, we don't readily and continuously cognize ourselves as separate from our body, our mind, and our senses. And that's our Achilles heel. We falsely identify with our psychophysical being, this body and mind, due to our ignorance. For example, and this I heard from Swami Sarvapriyananda, it's a wonderful example I'd like to share with you. Say a businessman is miserable, so he goes to an old Swami. And the businessman says, I'm miserable, please help me. And the Swami says, do you experience and feel your misery? The businessman says, of course. And the Swami replies, if you can feel your misery, you cannot be miserable, because the knower and the known are different. Misery is a feeling in the mind. If you are aware of the misery, you are aware of that feeling in the mind only. That which is aware of misery is not miserable. That which is aware of fear is not fearful. That which is aware of suffering is not suffering. So the businessman said to the Swami, you're right. I'm peaceful now. But the Swami said, no, you are not peaceful. You are the knower of the peace in your mind. Vivekananda's method is first analyze and thoroughly understand the principles of Advaita Vedanta. So faith in this path is based on rock-solid logic. Also, you at the beginning of this session were doing the pratyahara of watching the lake of the mind. And that is a practice that you can take with you throughout the day, to step back and know that you are the observer. Reframe yourself with the buddhi, watching the mind. Next, meditate on that truth. How? Vivekananda tells us. Hear day and night that you are that soul. Repeat it to yourself day and night, till it enters into your very veins, till it tingles in every drop of blood, till it is in your flesh and bone. Let the whole body be full of that one ideal. I am the birthless, the deathless, the blissful, the omniscient, the omnipotent, ever-glorious soul. Think on it, he says, day and night. Think on it till it becomes part and parcel of your life. All your actions will be magnified, transformed, deified by the very power of the thought. If matter is powerful, thought is omnipotent. Bring this thought to bear upon your life. Fill yourselves with the thought of your almightiness, your majesty, and your glory. So we must affirm this truth by inserting it into all of our thoughts and behaviors until it affects a change in our perceptions, and we find our old self melting away. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually, step by step. Naturally, the more we practice, the more we develop. For example, Swami Vivekananda traveled over a month in a desert in India and came upon most beautiful landscapes and lakes. One day he was especially thirsty and approached one of these lakes. But as he approached, the lake vanished. Vivekananda stated, immediately with a blow came into my brain that idea that this was a mirage about which I had read all my life. And then I remembered and smiled at my folly, that for the last month, all the beautiful landscapes and lakes I had been seeing were also a mirage, but I could not distinguish them there then. The next morning, he went on, I again began my march. There was the lake and the landscape, but with it immediately came the idea, this is a mirage. Once known, it has lost all of its power of illusion. So this illusion of the universe will break one day. The whole of this will vanish, melt away. This is realization. So this is the aim of Jnana Yoga, to become a Jivan Mukta, free while living. So let's go deeper into this Vedanta concept of this world illusion and the Vedanta logic that drives that knowledge home to us. The knowledge that all this is illusion. What causes this illusion? The first principle is called adhyasa, literally means mistake. And it's the classic example of the snake and the rope. And the reason this is an example of a snake and a rope is that this was brought home to me when I was in India, in Coimbatore, my last trip to India. With Swami Atmaramananda, we were walking on the Coimbatore campus. And he stopped me and said, there is a snake. And in the dusk, it looked like a snake. And so he walked closer, but this time it truly was a snake. So say we're walking along a road at night and suddenly come upon a dark coiled object. It's a rope, but in the darkness of our ignorance, we mistake it for a snake. Swami Vivekananda explains, Brahman, under the illusion of Maya, is seen as many, just as a rope is seen as a snake. It is the very rope that is seen as a snake. There are not two things there, a rope separate and a snake separate. In perfect perception, we never perceive the real and the false at the same time. And when we perceive the snake, we do not see the rope at all. It has vanished. When you see illusion, he says, you do not see the reality. He adds, but the fact that you see only one does not prove that the other is non-existent. The idea of the world is an obstruction covering the idea of God and is to be removed, but it does not have an existence. But it does have an existence. So how long will it take? How long will it take for this illusion to break? Vivekananda tells us, just the twinkling of an eye. When I know the truth, nothing happens except that the falsehood vanishes away. I took the rope for the snake, and now I see it is the rope. It is only a question of half a second, and the whole thing is done. If we are God and always have been so, to know this is the only natural thing. It should not take ages to find out what we have always been and what we now are. So when one has that experience, one is no longer deluded. One sees this world differently. Second, we come to the Advaitic principle of the true nature of the one and the many versus the error of thought. And the prime example that is given of this is the golden necklace. We can't claim that the individual soul or the apparent self and the world are non-existent, because the reality of Brahman is their substratum. So all of you, your reality is Brahman, the same for me. Similarly, we can't deny the existence of the golden necklace. And this is where we run into the subtlety of this argument. The gold itself has taken that form, but at the same time, we can't assert that the necklace exists because it loses its form when it's melted. In other words, it has a point of origin when it was designed, and also a point of end when it is melted. Therefore, the gold is real. The necklace is a mere appearance. The gold was there before and will remain after the necklace is melted. To continue the example of the gold necklace, Brahman, which is the gold, is the cause, and Maya, which is the necklace, is the effect. So this is a mirage. Once known, it has lost its power of illusion. The necklace is an illusory appearance of gold. Only when the gold is forgotten do we see a necklace. So we'll never be the same when we see a golden necklace. Our senses are pulled outward by the attraction of the world, and we miss the reality. The necklace has no isness, no independent reality. It depends for its existence upon gold to appear. The necklace has name and form, but if we say the necklace shape is there, therefore it exists, Shankara would argue, no, gold is there. Dependent on that, there is a shape, the necklace. Name and form are mere mental concepts. So there cannot be two realities. To accept the truth of gold, we must accept the falsity of the necklace. Similarly, to accept Brahman, the cause, we must negate Maya, the world illusion. Thought alone creates these divisions and illusions. So using these two classic examples of Vedanta logic, we just keep our spiritual life simple. We as jnanis can discriminate in order to patiently, step by step, day by day, remind ourselves, as Christ said, lead us not into temptation. In other words, let's not be deluded by this monkey mind and our outgoing senses, which form mental concepts of name and form and superimpose this world mirage on the ultimate reality. But let's make it our habit to routinely de-superimpose this illusion by reminding ourselves again and again, as Swami Vivekananda said and did. This is a mirage, and once known, it has lost its power of illusion. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.